All right, so let's talk about the asset, the actual person we're receiving in this trade, Ersan Ilyasova. He's no player to pout about. He's no all-star, but he's a solid power forward. He's been in the league since 2006. He has an established career, and I mentioned to you this earlier. We went live, Aaron. Is every single season he's been in the league since 2006, he's averaged double figures per game besides his rookie season. So he's giving you a consistent amount of scoring. His field goal percentage from his career is 45%. His three-point shooting percentage, and we're talking about a big guy, 6'10", 235 power forward, he's shooting 37% from behind the three-point line, and he's had years where he's been shooting 45% and 44%, and he does take threes. He's not a guy that takes 3-pointers in a season. No, he'll take threes. He shoots. So he's a big stretch four. I think he helps fill the hole that Greg Monroe is giving us, assuming he's leaving. I like this trade a lot. Aaron, after hearing his stats, after hearing the type of player that Ersan Ilyasova is, do you still feel the same way about him as you did moments ago?
Well, Noah, I want to point out that Ilyasova has scored in non-starter minutes. He scored in double digits in 23 minutes a game. This year he only averaged about 22 minutes a game. And he averaged, about 12 points and 6, 7 rebounds. And for Detroit, that's going to be valuable because we also need a guy that's going to be able to help Andre Drummond inside, because there are points where Drummond does get a little lazy and he misses some easy rebounds. And we're going to need someone inside to help with that. And Ilyasova is a perfect mix of a guy that can help you inside, get rebounds, and then stretch the floor on the offensive end, which is something Stan Van is in love with. He loves getting stretch fours.
Yep, he did that in Orlando.
Yep, Anthony Tolliver is another perfect example. He brought Tolliver in. Tolliver, not known for his defense, but on the defensive end, he was able to hold his own. He was able to shoot the three on the offensive end. So you see another pattern here. And I believe Tolliver is a free agent this offseason, if I'm correct. So it's going to be interesting to see now if Stan Van's not only going to not bring back Greg Monroe, or if he's not going to also bring back Anthony Tolliver.
No, I think Tolliver is a Piston. I think you're right about him being a free agent, but I think he's coming back. This was his best year was with us. He was nothing before he came to Detroit.
I love Anthony Tolliver. He's perfect mix.
Yeah, right. Stan Van loves him. He loves Stan Van. I think there's no reason to let him go, and he knows he's not a starter. He knows what his role is, and this is the best situation for him. I don't see any other situation unless he's that desperate to make a little more cash. But I that's just what I think. I think Tolliver's a Piston. So I think, and the other thing I was going to bring up is your biggest concern I'm seeing with you in this trade is the lack of depth at the three, the small forward position. Ersan Ilyasova, I think, can play small forward. I think he's 6'10". I think the defense is the biggest issue here, but Stan Van Gundy coaches defense like none other. He can shoot from all over the court. And it wouldn't even necessarily be going like bigger. We'd have a 7-footer and Drummond on the court, Tolliver and Ilyasova, who you really don't know who is a power forward or small forward. And you don't really need to have set positions there. You could just have one guy stay low post. It would probably be Ersan. But I just think the combination of those three on the court at the same time could work. What do you think?
I'm not overly thrilled about him playing the three just because he is a bigger guy at 6'10". He doesn't really fit the mold of a three, even though he can shoot. I don't see Ilyasova being a starter, and we'll talk about that in a couple minutes. But I see him coming off the bench, and he's going to need to be played at the power forward, in my opinion, because Detroit is going to need another good perimeter defender.
Yeah, I think this is a very interesting trade, to say the least, because you can't come into the season this year knowing what a starting lineup is going to be, because we have two excellent point guards in Brandon Jennings and Reggie Jackson most likely returning, and now somewhat of a confusion around every other position besides our center. So honestly, we can only come into this next season thinking one thing: Andre Drummond's our center, unless something drastic happens. But there's a lot of anxiety probably around the Pistons organization and Pistons fans. And I just have to say, Aaron, We have one of our newest members of Detroit Pistons Nation, Chris Plate. Is that how I pronounce it?
I pronounced it Chris Plate on our
Played
broadcast
right. He
the other
he
day.
he is he wants to join the call, so we're gonna add him to it. Let's see, Crispy 1132. Oh, I gotta add him as a friend. You're friend with him, right? On Skype?
Yeah,
Oh,
yeah.
no, I think it's working.
I just added him.
Okay. All right. So, fans, time to hear a third voice on this trade. You've already heard a very optimistic voice in Noah Loftman. I wouldn't say pessimistic approach, but a little concerned approach with Aaron Johnson. And now to hear a third voice. What's so great about Detroit Pistons Nation is we give you so many different perspectives. We don't just have one guy, two guys do these podcasts and articles. No, we got a whole team of people not only doing podcasts, not only doing articles, but a whole team of people running the Twitter, on our Instagram account. It's great. Just a lot of different perspectives and voice. And you guys can have favorites. You guys can have least favorites. We're just like any other entertainment program. And hopefully this call is going through, Crispy.
Hey guys, what's up?
Okay, Chris. I'm Noah Loftman. I don't know if I've ever formally met you yet, but I'm the broadcasting director for Detroit Pistons Nation. You had a podcast the other day with Aaron Johnson, so I know you've worked with him. We've just been talking about the recent trade that just occurred about 20 minutes ago, but we've been talking about it for the past 10 minutes. I'm going to ask you the simple question, Chris. Do you like the trade? Why or why not?
I don't, and here's why. Two reasons. One, I don't think he's worth the $8 million, but the only thing that's giving me confidence is that Stan has done great with stretch fours in the past. He's turned them around and developed them really well. But two is Anthony Tolliver played great in that role, and now I think that we have a team option on him. So I think that that opens the door to a possibility of leaving him. I don't know if Ersan's the starting quality power forward that we need, and I just think that $8 million eats up a lot of our cap space, and we could have I think for $8 million got somebody better in free agency.
Yeah, I really admire Ersan's play, and I feel like his style of play is really going to benefit Stan Van Gundy's system. As you mentioned, Van Gundy loves his stretch fours, and I just don't know how confident he is with Anthony Tolliver. He is only 6'8". He's a little undersized. Aaron, after hearing Chris's points, do you have anything else you want to add?
Well, besides the lack of depth we have at the small forward position, and whether or not we're going to be able to address it in the draft, or it can become a problem, because if guys like Stanley Johnson, Justice Winslow, and Kelly Oubre maybe don't make it to the 8 spot, and I'm not sure how much I like Kelly Oubre because, in my opinion, he's a very high risk, you don't know what you're gonna get out of him. He's a high risk player, so maybe this $8 million is going to come back to bite us if we're not able to secure one of those top small forward prospects in the draft. So I understand Chris's point there, but you gotta have faith in Stan Van Gundy because Detroit's having a very good offseason, and the fact that the draft and free agency haven't occurred yet just makes you think it's only going to get better. Arn Tellem coming to Detroit possibly moving from Ann Arbor over to Detroit. There's so much news occurring with the Pistons, and you see, our Twitter is just, a lot of more people are talking, and you see the fans just coming out of nowhere, joining the Pistons bandwagon, and this is great for the city because it's going to bring in revenue to our games, building this new team. Everyone's going to want to see these new players. I know I'm kind of getting off of what you just asked me, but this has got to be I believe this is a smart move because of what this is going to bring to a city. And I was just thinking about this earlier while I was taking my final exams in class. I was just thinking about the Pistons, and you got to be excited to see all these new players come to your city. As a fan, you want to see all these new guys mesh in with the system, and that's going to bring in revenue to a city that needs the fans. Detroit is going to need fans if they want to win because a fan base is huge for
Aaron,
a team.
I think the fans are there. We've known they're there because during that 04 to 07 stretch, the Pistons ranked top. I think they were number 1 year in attendance. So, I mean, Detroit, the metro area is a big city. I mean, they sell out those Red Wings games, Lions games. Tigers is a decent attendance. I think the fans are there. They just don't want to come out right now because in the past 6 years, the Pistons have shown them no reason for them to come out. But I think you're right. This is a step in the right direction. Turning the table back to this trade and the upcoming draft. Chris, I'm going to go back to you.
Okay, yeah. I just wanted to say something to Aaron's point, really. As far as the Stanley Johnson, Justice Winslow, I do think that one of them makes it to us.
Oh, yeah.
Probably Stanley Johnson.
Yeah, that was part of the question I was going to ask you. I was going to ask you, assuming we draft Stanley Johnson, because he's 6'7", I think he can play the 3 actually. Could you see Stanley Johnson starting for the Pistons at small forward?
Oh yeah, I envisioned ever since I've been on the bandwagon strong of drafting him from the start, and ever since I got on that concept, I've looked at his game, I've scouted him, and I think he can start right away, and I think he should start right away. I think he can contribute right away, and I think that even if worst case scenario, I think what opens up the door now is if we're going to get 3 players now. I think there's really only 3 players we're looking at with the 8th spot. I think we're only looking at Stanley Johnson as our 1, I think, or Justice Winslow, but I don't think we're expecting him to fall to us. Second is the foreign big shooter. I can't pronounce his last name. Porzingis, I believe.
Yeah, Kristaps Porzingis.
Yeah, and then the other foreigner, I can't pronounce his name either.
Mario Arizona, or
yeah. So I think one of those 2, because especially a guy like Mario can play the 2 or the 3. So I think we really go with one of those 2, either Stanley Johnson or Mario at our 8th pick. But I don't see Kelly Oubre, but I actually am a fan of him. But yeah, I agree, he's a risk.
No, I think assuming Winslow's going to be selected before the 8th pick, I think we really need to hope that Stanley Johnson is available for our pick. Aaron, do you agree with Chris that Stanley Johnson is the best available option, assuming that Winslow is already selected?
You know what, Noah? I'm almost willing to say that I believe Stanley Johnson, at the end of their careers, Stanley Johnson will be the better small forward than Justice Winslow. I really have fallen in love with Stanley Johnson these last few weeks because I've been spending so much time looking at really between those 2 guys, Justice Winslow and Stanley Johnson, and I look at the physical tools and the offensive, defensive tools. I just think Stanley Johnson has the height advantage. He's 6'7", 6'8". He'll be able to defend better than Winslow will against bigger small forwards, and that's a problem, as we were talking about with KCP being only 6'6", guys like LeBron James and Kevin Durant, bigger small forwards, will be able to have their way against a guy like Winslow unless Winslow's able to put on a lot of strength and not let them bully him around. But Johnson also, though, right now his shot is better than Justice Winslow's, in my opinion. Winslow's shot, I think, is a little too inconsistent, and Stanley has shown the tools through his workouts. I've read about some of his workouts with these different teams, and everyone seems to like what he's been doing. So I think that with what's going on, and if the Pistons can get Stanley Johnson, he's going to start right away. And that's, I think, what every Pistons fan has had in mind. I think they've all thought, okay, if we're going to draft a small forward, he's got to be starting for us.
Yeah.
And in this case, if we're able to get Stanley Johnson, he's got to be starting for us.
Right. And now, for the sake of Stanley Johnson, I think he needs to be selected by us because the teams that are drafting before us, the Denver Nuggets, the Sacramento Kings, the Orlando Magic, and then the New York Knicks, and then obviously the Sixers, Lakers, and T-Wolves, I think he would benefit the most from being on the Detroit Pistons. That being said, Chris, do you see any other teams drafting before a legitimate threat that they're going to pick Johnson before we get the chance to?
I've been looking at the draft over and over again as far as the top 8 picks, and I don't believe that there is a way that Stanley Johnson doesn't fall to us at 8. I think really Denver, I think, is pretty set on Winslow. Denver might be the only threat to take Stanley Johnson, but it sounds like D'Angelo Russell, Emmanuel Mudiay, and the 2 bigs, Okafor and Towns, are all going 1 through 4, somewhere around there. And then next, you got to believe, I'm I'm starting to believe that Sacramento is going for Willie Cauley-Stein, and I believe that the Orlando Magic are going for one of the foreign players, and I believe that Denver goes for Winslow then. And I think that's how Stanley Johnson slides to us. Or maybe even one of the foreign players. Denver has been linked heavily to Porzingis, and also uh, slightly to Mario. So I think that there's almost no way Stanley Johnson isn't in our lap. And I agree with Aaron. Maybe it's just because it's realistic to us, but I'm starting to love the idea of Stanley Johnson and love him as a long term as opposed to Justice Winslow. But I'll be happy if we end with either of them by the end of draft night.
And Chris, to talk about your draft order there, I've actually looked at Jeff Goodman's new mock draft, and he actually has Justice Winslow sliding all the way to 8 to us, and Stanley Johnson going all the way to 12, which I think is interesting because that means certain guys have to go before those two, which you wouldn't expect.
He's definitely valuing the foreign players.
Right, and that has Kristaps Porzingis going to the Magic, and I really don't see Winslow falling that far just because he has impressed so much in his run with Duke, and I just don't think he's going to fall to us at 8.
Yeah, I agree. I agree with that. I'm kind of shocked though by Stanley Johnson going 12. It's going to be interesting if we have to choose between Winslow and Johnson. But like you said, Aaron, and like I've said, I believe that we're both on the same thought. As at this point, I'm taking Stanley Johnson no matter what.
All right, interesting. Aaron, I know you were messaging me outside of this podcast that your brother wanted to jump on. Is he going to jump on right now?
Yeah, I'm about to invite him in.
Okay, sweet. That's a fourth voice you fans get to hear about different perspectives on this trade and upcoming draft. So he's coming in the next few minutes?
He should be here in seconds.
All right. So you can introduce him for everyone.
All right. All right. Brendan, you here? I am here. Hello, guys. Okay, so Brendan, you're here to talk about the recent acquisition of Ersan Ilyasova. Brendan, do you like the trade?
I think that overall it's a very good move for Detroit because Stan Van Gundy acquired a guy that he can use as a starter, or if they're able to find someone else to play power forward, either through the draft or free agency. Ilyasova is a guy that you can use off the bench, and he'd be a phenomenal rotation player for the Pistons.
Thank you, Brendan. I don't know if I've ever met you. I'm Noah Loftman, part of Detroit Pistons Nation, and I agree with you. And I think our other buddy Chris here, and I think we all agree that his playing style fits Stan Van Gundy's coaching style in that stretch 4. I think the biggest concern is the lack of depth now at the small forward position and the lack of defensive depth at the small forward and power forward position. How much are you concerned regarding that?
At this point in time, I wouldn't say that I'm overly concerned because you have a whole off season in front of you. But that's why I'm very big on a guy like DeMarre Carroll being signed if we are unable to draft Justice Winslow, because Carroll automatically fills a huge defensive void that the Pistons have. Power forward wise, I don't think that it's as big of an issue. I think for Stan Van's system, the bigger priority is having a stretch 4 that can hit outside shots and provide spacing. And then the defense will just play itself out.
All right, interesting. You mentioned DeMarre Carroll, and I don't know how likely that signing is. Now, are you hearing stuff that I'm not hearing, and do you think that us signing DeMarre Carroll is a very likely option this offseason?
I see DeMarre Carroll as a big target for the Pistons, primarily because the Atlanta Hawks have a lot of money to spend. Really having to re-sign all 5 of their starters over the course of the next 2 off seasons. And DeMarre Carroll may end up being the odd man out. And if you're Detroit, you have some money to play with. I could really see the Pistons making a strong push for him because everybody knows that they talk about wanting Draymond Green. But regardless if Golden State wins the finals or not, I don't see Draymond Green leaving. It's just too good of a situation for him to leave. It makes it that much more of a priority to chase after a guy like DeMarre Carroll and do everything you can to bring him in.
Right. No, yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
Now,
I just want to jump in.
Yeah, go, Chris. I was about to just ask you a question that you were the one concerned about the money that we're giving up now with this trade with Ersan Ilyasova.
Yeah.
Now, can we afford DeMarre Carroll?
Yeah, that's perfect because that's what I wanted to talk about, strictly how to spend our money now with this trade and how that affects that. So my concerns are now is one, you have to get a small forward, but I'm actually kind of opposed to signing DeMarre Carroll, a guy like that. What I want to do is I want to start Stanley Johnson from day one. The more experience he gets, the better he'll be, the faster he'll be, and I believe he's a perennial all-star guy. Like, I have huge faith in this guy as a great player down the line. So I would be opposed to starting Stanley and getting some type of capable mental
I think we're losing
small
you there,
forward,
Chris.
that is, an older guy that can just kind of shoot and play D, or just some type of role player to pick him up. But and then as far as I think the next important thing is the center, the backup center. What was that?
Oh, for a second we were losing you.
Was that Noah?
For a second we kind of lost you via your connection, but you're back now.
Okay. So did you need me to repeat any of that?
From what I heard, I think did you mention any specific names, or you just kind of give us an idea of what type of guys you wanted to go after?
I can't really think of a small forward that's like a veteran off the top of my head that's on the free agency board.
Yeah, we can pull it up on mine right now, which I'll do.
I actually have one in mind, if I can jump on it.
Go ahead.
You know, I was looking, and most of this is actually through 2K, but Matt Barnes is going to be a free agent, and he's nowhere near a starter, but he's definitely a role player. He can play defense, shoot the three, and he could definitely be an option for Detroit if they're looking to take Stanley Johnson and find someone to come off the bench.
Okay, I like that name. But I think the biggest target for us right now is now a backup center, and I believe it's Brandon Wright. I think he's a phenomenal backup big, and I think he's somebody we should lock up because he has a similar style to Drummond, as like a big that has a soft touch around the basket and can protect the rim. And he's very athletic and mobile, so he can run the pick and roll and be an excellent factor there. So I think he's our one target, and then after that, kind of fill out the roster spots. Maybe see if a guy like Millsap is actually available, and then you don't have to start Ilyasova and just be deep at the forward position. Yep. But yeah, I'd say Brandon Wright should be our number one target. And then after that, small forward and power forward, and kind of fill out the roster.
Yeah,
Chris, I definitely agree with you on that.
Oh no, go on, Anthony. I just wanted to get Brennan back in the conversation.
Okay, I just wanted to quickly say I was talking to Chris about this in our last podcast, and I really do like Brandon Wright because as all the points you said were great right there. But the problem with Wright is that we're going to have to pay him a pretty good price. So then we're going to have to work around free agents and with smaller, money ways. We're going to have to get them to look to sign here for smaller deals because Wright, I believe, is going to want around 3 years, $16 million, somewhere in that area, just because he's very young. He can become a premier center. He can probably start for a team in the future if he gets that option. And he's bounced around the league for some reason, which has kind of caught me by surprise. But I think this is a perfect fit for him because he can come here, play the backup center position, get a lot of minutes, and flourish in Stan Van Gundy's system, a rim protector who can play on the offensive end inside and just be a presence that can really help Andre Drummond mature.
All right, Brennan, let's get you back into the conversation here. We're talking about lack of depth, the small forward position, and how to help get that depth back. Now, we still have a guy that we could consider a small forward or power forward. He's 6'7". Cartier Martin. He's a free agent this year. I think he's unrestricted. Brendan, is it worth it to re-sign this guy? Brendan, are you there?
No, I'm losing you in and out. But if I heard you correctly, you're talking about Cartier Martin.
Yeah, is it worth it to re-sign Cartier Martin at this point?
Recently, I thought I had read something that he had an option to return and had decided to come back. And I think he provides depth. I know he was in a very minimal role this past season, and I don't really see that role greatly increasing. But I think if you're looking for depth, he's a very valuable piece to that puzzle.
Okay. Yeah, I think for a cheap price, I say we go after him again. Aaron, you got any other last questions you want to share with us? Chris, any of you guys, you got any more questions?
Well, Noah, I just want to tell you that Cartier Martin has opted into his contract. It actually happened, I believe it was around 2 weeks ago. And one last thing is Caron Butler actually just tweeted out thanking the Detroit Pistons and saying thank you to them for the time he spent with us. And that's just a class act by Caron Butler, who hopefully can go back to his hometown and play on a good team, just like Milwaukee was good this year.
Right.
But then eventually have to lose to Detroit
yeah.
Detroit's a better team.
No, I think Caron Butler was completely fine with this trade. Obviously, as I mentioned earlier, I live in the Milwaukee area, and he has a whole family. He still has a house here. His kids go to school in Wisconsin. I think he's fine. He's fine with this trade. I think this really benefits both teams. I think the Milwaukee's loaded at the power forward and center position, and Ersan was not getting the minutes that he used to get this year. I think this definitely benefits both teams. Chris, you messaged me outside this chat that you wanted to talk about how this trade impacts Greg Monroe, and my opinions with it is that this just makes it even more obvious that Greg Monroe is not returning. Do you agree?
Yeah, I agree. And it's kind of a sad agreement because I like Monroe. I kind of accepted the fact that he's gone and he's moving on. I think those whole reports about New York and stuff earlier in the year, before the season was even done, actually, I thought that was pretty accurate. So I think he's gone, and I think it was a smart move to make a trade and kind of have something to get instead of just letting Monroe walk and having nothing available and then having to scramble for something. So in the end, the trade worked out well, but yeah, I think it's the end for the Greg Monroe era in Detroit, and I'll be curious to see where he lands.
All right, yeah, me too. I think we're gonna end this podcast today by all three of you. Let's start with you, Aaron. I'm gonna ask you this. Give me your ideal, but it has to be realistic, starting five for this next Pistons regular season.
All right, I'm going to make this quick. Reggie Jackson, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, Stanley Johnson, Thaddeus Young, Andre Drummond.
Oh, there's a name that we haven't really been talking about, Thaddeus Young. Chris, I'm going to ask you your ideal starting lineup, and then also give me your opinions on possibly signing or trading for Thaddeus Young.
All right, so point guard, Brandon Jennings over Reggie Jackson. Whether he leaves or whether he comes back as a sixth man, fine with me. Brandon Jennings should be our guy. 2, KCP. 3, Stanley Johnson. 4, I think it's going to end up being Ilyasova, but I'd like us to target maybe a Millsap or I'd like us to target a Millsap and then Andre Drummond at the 5.
All right. So do you have any thoughts on Thaddeus Young?
Oh, as far as Thaddeus Young, he's a good player. I don't know how well he can shoot, so I don't know how well he would fit in Stan's system. But yeah, I like him because he makes the right plays. He hustles. So I wouldn't see him as a bad option. But I think at $9 million, around there, I don't think he's a smart investment for a front court unless it's a 1-year deal, because we already just put $8 million into Ilyasova for this year. So we should kind of evenly distribute that out and focus on the backup center as well as the small forward and backup power forward positions.
Brennan, you want to go?
I'm thinking that here's how I see it. Brandon Jennings is going to come back, and I think he's going to start at point guard. If I was Stan Van Gundy, I would start Reggie Jackson. But I think what will happen is it will be Brandon Jennings, Contavious Caldwell-Pope, Justice Winslow, or Stanley Johnson, depending who's drafted, and then Ilyasova and Drummond to round out the starting five.
Yeah, my ideal starting five would consist of one of the two, Brandon Jennings or Reggie Jackson, starting at the one. I feel like immediately I think Reggie Jackson is going to start for this team due to the fact that Brandon's still recovering from an Achilles tendon tear. And then I think we're honestly going to see the two switch off. And I don't know how big of a deal it is on who starts. I see that Van Gundy's going to go with a lot of different lineups throughout the year, especially with the backcourt. I could see Jennings and Jackson on the court together, one on the court to start, one on the court in the fourth quarter. I think minutes will be evenly distributed, but I think from the get-go we're going to have Jackson start at the 1, KCP at the 2, hopefully Stanley Johnson at the 3, and being realistic, I still think Ersan's going to start at the 4, and then Andre Drummond, who I think is the biggest X factor for us this season. We didn't get a lot of time to talk about him. We still can if you guys don't have to go anywhere. But I still think this season, offensively and defensively, rests upon the shoulders of Andre Drummond.
Well, if I can just say really quick, I guess it's more of a question to pose.
Okay.
Do you guys see the Brandon Jennings, Reggie Jackson thing really working out? Because from my perspective, Brandon Jennings doesn't seem like the kind of player that really wants to share his minutes. I know he wants to win, but it seems like he's always been about, playing as much as possible, being the guy, at least in his own sense. And then if you're Reggie Jackson, you wanted out of Oklahoma City to get a chance to start and be the starting point guard somewhere. They just don't seem like they would mix as a combination of one starting, one coming off the bench, whether they rotate, whether it's a consistent lineup, however they decide to play it. I'm just not sure that based off their personalities and the type of players that they are, I could see that even more.
All right. Who wants to answer that one first?
Furthermore reason for me to I'll jump in. Furthermore reason for me, I agree with you. Furthermore reason for me to say sign and trade Reggie Jackson. I think we can get more than a Kyle Singles, DJ Augustine back, and I agree Reggie Jackson's not going to like it. I don't think Jennings will have a problem with it. Jennings has proved to me last year that he is all about the team. He is unselfish as it gets. He's been totally unfairly criticized throughout his career, and I think he really is about the team. So I think he will have no problem coming off the bench. He's a humble guy. So I think he won't have a problem. I think it's Reggie Jackson who will have a problem even if he starts. I don't think he'll like splitting minutes because Jennings is going to deserve and get a lot of minutes because of how well he played for Stan last year.
I'll answer last. Aaron, you go ahead.
All right. Well, I'm going to take this into a different perspective. Andre Drummond is a restricted free agent in 2016. And Detroit doesn't want a Greg Monroe situation where he just accepts a 1 year, however much deal, and then is basically gone after that. So, if I'm Stan Van Gundy, I'm consulting Andre Drummond. I'm saying, Andre, you're my star. You're my guy. Who do you want at point guard? Who do you want to be drafted? What do you want the lineup to look like? Because Andre's our guy, and we have to keep him. If we lost Andre Drummond, this whole rebuild process is basically a failure because we don't have anyone to build around. And Andre has shown how much he's liked Reggie Jackson and KCP and Quincy Miller as he's recently befriended him. So you got to keep these guys in a good mood. You got to have them playing. You got to sign back Quincy Miller. You got to do whatever you can to please your future, your center, your star, Andre Drummond. So that's why I'm definitely thinking Reggie Jackson will end up starting. Now, going to Brandon Jennings, I do believe the Pistons will try out a lineup consisting of both of them at times. And eventually, I do see Reggie Jackson completely taking over the starting spot just because we don't know how Jennings is going to come back after that MCL tear.
Achilles,
pardon. But there's so much questioning with Jennings right now. It just seems like Jackson, who finished off the season so well for Detroit, has found his role as being a guy that's just kind of doing a little bit of everything, and he's doing it very well. I just believe that Jackson, at the end of the day, when we're in the playoffs, is going to be our starting point guard.
I also somewhat agree with you, Aaron. I think the biggest thing here is Stan Van Gundy is valuing athletes and basketball players, and he wants depth, and he wants a lot of them. Because if you look at the successful teams in the NBA, they either have extreme talent, like a LeBron James, James Harden, Stephen Curry, or they just have a bunch of really good athletes that can all play together and all play different positions. And I take the Milwaukee Bucks, for example. They give you different starting lineups every night. They give you different lineups on the court every night, and they just play with who's ever hot at that moment. And I still see Reggie Jackson starting at the point guard for us because of the uncertainty with Brandon Jennings' recovery. I know everything's pointing to a fantastic recovery, but it's a devastating injury, one of the worst that you could get in sports. He's not going to be the same player no matter what. That's just the fact. The Achilles is a crucial part of the leg and foot. I could totally see this Jackson Jennings situation being a Lou Williams, Kyle Lowry situation, where Lou Williams comes off the bench, plays point guard and shooting guard. I could honestly see Brandon Jennings playing both of that. Same with Reggie Jackson. And Williams averaged 25 minutes a game this season, and 15.5 points, 2.5 assists, and 1.9 rebounds. So he was still an offensive threat coming off the bench, won Sixth Man of the Year. I think from opening night, whenever that is, late October, Reggie Jackson is going to be the starting point guard, and Stan Van Gundy is going to tell Brandon Jennings, well, he was a healthy guy. He was the guy working out with the team all season, and I know you can't control that. And I'm sure, as you mentioned, Chris, Jennings is a different type of man now than he was in Milwaukee. He has bought into Stan's philosophy and Stan's coaching. He will understand that. And then Brandon's going to have to earn that starting spot, and I could see the two battling it out. And I don't think that's such an unsafe environment like you're portraying it to be, Brennan. Like I take it as like a quarterback situation, like Ohio State right now with the 3 different quarterbacks. That's a very healthy situation where you have 3 guys competing their tails off every night, every game, every practice. I think this will just raise the level of talent with the two. I think this is a great way to handle it. Any other thoughts? Anyone?
Here's one other thought. Can you really see Brandon Jennings playing shooting guard, though? Is he truly a good enough shooter to play shooting guard alongside Reggie Jackson, who struggles shooting the basketball?
I think we saw his shot. He's an inconsistent shooter. We know that. He was inconsistent in Milwaukee. He was inconsistent in Detroit, his career. But he has games where he has shown that he can shoot the 3. He can shoot from anywhere on the court. And I don't know if he'd necessarily be playing more of a traditional shooting guard role. I think it would be more of a dual threat. You got 2 ball handlers, 2 facilitators, and 2 scoring threats that can drive to the basket and shoot with him and Jackson. And I think it will be something unique and original. I don't think it's just going to be Jennings, hanging out behind the 3-point line that we see with other shooting guards around the league. No, I think this is going to be a very original, unique situation when the 2 are on the court together.
Yeah, no, I really like what you have just said, and I think that they can work together. I think if two guys want to help a team win, they'll take the sacrifice in how many points they're going to score and how many minutes they're going to have the ball in their hands. So depending on what their attitudes are, and if they're saying, okay, we want to win this year, let's get a title back to Detroit, let's get back to the playoffs. I mean, come on, guys. It's been 6 years since one of, I think, the top franchises over history has made the playoffs. And that's a big drought that you can't afford to have. So I think Stan Van Gundy's finding his group of guys that are going to get him into the playoffs. And
I mentioned this in my article on PistonsNation.net, is that assuming Greg Monroe walks away this offseason, Stan Van Gundy will only have 3 players that he originally inherited a year ago when taking this job in Detroit. Those 3 players would be Brandon Jennings, KCP, and Andre Drummond. My last question of the day for all 3 of you, let's start with you, Chris, is I want to talk about this, but we kind of went into a different direction earlier. But how much of this season's success and team's future rest on the shoulders of Andre Drummond, and are we kind of putting too much trust into this guy?
No, he's developed exponentially these last couple seasons, and so I don't think it's it seems by all accounts he wants it too, by the way he's talking to the media with those quotes about slimming down, being tired of losing. It shows that he does want to win and he's ready for the responsibility. He's really taken a leadership role with the Pistons, and I don't really think we've had a leader these last couple seasons. We've just had guys that are good, but I don't think we've had a leader. And now I think this is a big step for us because Drummond is taking that role. And I agree to your point about Stan Van Gundy and his now only having 3 players left. I think it's a good thing. I think now that those were the 3 from day one that he chose. Okay, maybe not Brandon Jennings, but from day one, those are the 3 he said. Okay, these are 3 guys I want to keep. Everybody else, I'm going to build the roster my way. So I think it's great that in only one whole season, if you count last season when he was hired, that he's been able to start to build the roster he wants.
Aaron, agree or disagree?
Definitely agree with that. Chris said everything I was going to say.
All right. Brendan, go ahead.
All right, I'm going to disagree. I have to be the odd man out. We're talking about a guy in Andre Drummond who's going to get you, let's go 20 and 15 tonight. And those 20 points are going to be garbage points. They're going to be offensive rebounds that he puts back for dunks, quick offensive rebounds he puts in for layups. He'll get some nice alley-oops and stuff like that. But he's not what you're centering your half-court offense around. And defensively, he's going to be good rim protection. He's going to provide the defense that you need. Personally, I don't think this season rides on the shoulders of Andre Drummond. I think it rides more on our ability to shoot the basketball and play defense. We saw a guy like Jody Meeks this year. He struggled shooting the basketball. We saw KCP. He had times where he really struggled shooting the basketball. The small forward question, I think that's the biggest thing right now. Do we get a small forward that can provide that slashing that we need on offense? Can we slide down to a small lineup and let KCP run that 3 if Jennings and Jackson do work together side by side? I think those are all bigger points than Andre Drummond because you know what you're going to get out of Andre. You know that Andre's not going to be a great free throw shooter. You know that you're not going to post up Andre on the block and expect 2 points out of it. That's just not who he is. So that's why I don't think this season rides on his shoulders.
I definitely disagree with that, Brennan. I'm gonna stop you right there because Andre Drummond, when he joined the league, yes, he was not a post presence. But I think now he's showing that he can post up and he can hit a hook shot. I definitely think Detroit can run an offense through him. He's a very good option, Brendan. And I don't know how much you've watched the Pistons since Andre Drummond this year or last year now. But Drummond's developed a back to the basket game, and he's done it very well. I definitely think Detroit can run the offense through him, given the amount of shooters and floor space that they need.
Yeah, Chris, go ahead and I'll share my opinion after.
Aaron, you try to run an offense through Andre Drummond. Sorry, Chris, go ahead.
Okay, yeah.
Okay. All right, so my answer to your whole thing is my response is not yet. Drummond, this is his 4th year of his career.
Right.
I mean, he's super young, and to say already we know what he is and we know what he's capable of and all that is nonsense. He's developing a post game. His post game, to Aaron's point, improved dramatically last year. So we're not at that point yet. But I can definitely see Drummond evolving into a solid, if not good, post player, and especially with the system around him. With all these, we have a great talent of role players that can do some damage. So I do think that a lot of this season rests on Drummond because this is how the system is built, and offensively and defensively, this team is built around Drummond.
All right, Brennan, I know you're itching to share some points to argue with your brother. Go ahead.
I understand that Andre's post game is improving, but it's not something that you can run an offense around. That's just not traditionally who he is. That's not the type of player that Andre Drummond is. That's not to say that his game's, it's not improving. I'm not saying that Drummond's not becoming an occasional option, But you're not going to run your offense through feeding Andre in the post. You're going to run your offense through either lobbing it up to Andre or the outside shooting, which then puts him in a position to get offensive rebounds and put the ball back in the net. You're not going to run an isolation and then dish it inside to Andre and see what he can do on the block. That's just not Stan Van's style of offense. That's not Andre Drummond's strength, and that's why I don't think it rests on his shoulders.
No, look at Orlando though. Look at when he had Orlando. Yeah, Dwight Howard was a better post player than Drummond is at the time. But what they did, their main threat wasn't the post up of Dwight Howard. It was the pick and roll, and that's what they're gonna do. They're gonna run the pick and roll, and Drummond's a big body. He's quick. He's agile. If that man gets beat on the pick and roll, then somebody is going to have to come in and help, and that leaves a three-point shooter. You have a drive and kick scenario. So I think that's what the offense is built around right now, while Drummond's still developing his post game.
I think
exactly.
Go ahead. Go ahead, Brandon. Go ahead.
That's why the shooting is what is one of the most important things. Because Andre Drummond is going to run the pick and roll. He's going to do his job. But we've seen guys like Jody Meeks struggle. We've seen Kentavious Caldwell-Pope have streaks where he cannot hit a shot. We don't know if we're going to have a small forward who's going to be able to hit the outside shot. We've had problems finding a consistent power forward. I mean, Greg Monroe was never a guy that we were going to dish out and be able to use from long range. Tolliver provided that for us last year. That's why that's a bigger issue to me than Andre Drummond in the post, because yes, the pick and roll is how they're going to use him, but the shooting has to be there for it to be effective, because if the shooting's not there, then they're going to leave the shooters a little less contested, guard Andre in the post, and if they can't hit shots, the defense is going to win the possession.
Yeah, I agree with you, Brennan. I think the pick and roll, we saw a lot of great glimpses of it this regular season. I think our best games this season were won because of a lethal pick and roll ran by Andre Drummond and Brandon Jennings, or Drummond and Reggie Jackson late in the games. I remember particularly the Indiana game where you had a pick and roll with Jennings and Andre, and Jennings kind of put up a floater, and Andre was right there for a last-second tip-in. Stuff like that is just great to see, but you're right. If we don't have the outside shooting, and that's why his system in Orlando worked, because he had shooters, we're in trouble. And I think that is a big offseason priority, that whether we're going to fill that hole in our draft or in the free agency or what, or just simply coach KCP and Jody Meeks to become better shooters, because they weren't there for us in the last year. And Jody Meeks, he's had his moments, but I don't know. I mean, when he came to Detroit last year, we expected a lot more than what we got.
Here's the other thing with Andre Drummond. Over his course of 3 seasons in the NBA, now, I understand that his field goal attempts have increased slightly, but he shot 60% in his rookie year, and then in his second year, he was a 62% shooter from the field. Last year, he only shot 51%. That's why you can't post him up on the block. That's why the only way Andre's going to score is off of garbage points like offensive rebounds and putbacks, or on the lobs on alley-oops, which is why, again, you can't put this season on his shoulders. You can't put it on the shoulders of a 51% shooter.
Okay, one thing I want to say that really quick, and then I've got all my points in. You brought up the point that, it's the shooters, and no doubt the shooters are a crucial part of this system. I mean, it's of any system nowadays. Shooters are valuable. But what do we see when it all comes down to in the finals and every game we watch? It all comes down to the star. Who's the star? It's Andre Drummond. So this season is crucial for him because the spotlight's on him now. He's our guy. He's our star. So no matter what, no matter how unfair it is, that's just the day and age we live in as far as the media goes.
Chris,
it's 100%.
That is where I'm most concerned. Look at the best teams in the league. How many of those teams have a center as their star, and a center who can't shoot free throws and can't shoot more than 2 feet away from the basket? And I think that's the biggest point that Brendan's bringing up, is that's a little bit scary if he's our star and he's the go-to guy with a second left. Or what are we going to do? Lob it up for a tip-in? Brendan, Aaron, you guys go ahead.
Who wants to go first? Because I think, Noah, you just completely emphasized my point. You cannot put the season on Andre Drummond's shoulders. I'll say it again. You can't rely on Andre Drummond in the fourth quarter. The only thing you can rely on Andre Drummond for in the fourth quarter is to have a warm seat on the bench because he can't shoot free throws. That's why he can't be our star. That's why you really got to hope that the Pistons hit in the draft, and they're not going to have their star this year, whether it's Winslow or Johnson, but hopefully 2-3 years down the line, that's our star. And Andre Drummond is kind of doing what Dwight Howard's doing with James Harden in Houston. He's not the guy, but he's very important because you're not going to be able to use Andre Drummond as your star centerpiece. He cannot take over games. Stars take over games. Andre Drummond cannot do that. He just does not have the ability. At least he's not proven that he has the ability. That's why I don't think he's the star of the future. Very important, very crucial, very necessary. Is he the star? I don't know. And if he is, I can't say I'm comfortable with that.
Well, Brendan, I'd like to go back to the Magic with Stan Van Gundy as their coach and a guy that Andre Drummond is compared to all the time, Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard was able to carry that team to the finals, and Dwight Howard was by far the best player on that team, with no doubt. But you know what Dwight Howard had? Shooters. And that's why that team was successful, Brendan. That's why Detroit is going after every shooter possible. Ersan Ilyasova, we brought him in. Why? Because he's a stretch forward shooter. And who did Dwight Howard play against or play alongside with? Ryan Anderson, a stretch forward shooter. That's why Andre Drummond is our centerpiece. Because we can bring in Andre Drummond and everyone's going to be worried about him inside. And that's why we have shooters on the outside covering the length of the floor. Because then Andre Drummond, if he gets in the post, if he's able to become a solid passer, can dish it out to four guys that are around the three-point line. And that's why this offense can work. He's the best pick-and-roll center in the league. Him and Reggie Jackson showed that. They were able to throw alley-oops up to ridiculous heights because Jackson would throw it up and Andre would just reach up to the sky, grab it and throw it down. This offense is good. The defense is good. This team has it all right now. While they progress through free agency and the draft, this team is only going to get better, Brendan. This offense is working. Stan Van Gundy's putting together the team he wants. Stan Van Gundy's a masterful coach, and you have to believe in Stan Van Gundy.
Okay.
Hashtag in Stan we trust.
But, Aaron, you cannot forget the most crucial difference between Andre Drummond and Dwight Howard. Dwight Howard, you could give him a touch on the block, and there was a good chance he was going to make a play. Andre Drummond, you're going to give him a touch on the block, and you're praying that his shot at least hits off the rim. That's the difference, okay? You can't throw it inside to Dwight like you could to Andre. Because when you throw it inside to Dwight, he's got the ability to now look, see the floor, kick out, because you have to prevent the shooters from getting the basketball, but you got to respect his post game. Andre Drummond, you don't have to respect his post game as much, so you're going to make sure that ball doesn't get outside. That is the biggest difference.
But you're also basing that off of last year. This is Drummond's fourth year. He's now in his prime.
I'm basing that off of the last 3 years, Aaron. Let's look back to him at UConn. This is Andre Drummond. This is what he has proven as a player. This is what he is as of now. I am basing that off of everything he has shown. We're talking about, maybe because it's his fourth year, he could do this. We said the same stuff in the last offseason. Now it's his third year. Maybe he'll have a better post game. His shooting percentage declined, Aaron. Come on. You can't sit here and start saying that he might be able to do this and this because it's the magical fourth year. Andre Drummond is who Andre Drummond is. Let's not try to make him something else. Let's play to his strengths and utilize what he has. But you cannot compare him to what Dwight Howard was for Orlando back in 2009, 2010, because they are not the same. Similar, not the same.
Brendan, Andre Drummond is 21 years old. You can't say this is all we're getting out of him, Brendan. He has a whole nother offseason to get better in his postgame. And Chris and Noah, we're leaving you out. I'm going to end this quick.
No, this is fine. This is so entertaining.
Oh my! You should see us when we're not live because we'd be probably fist fighting right now.
I could tell. This is great. No pressure. Finish your points.
But Andre's only entering his 4th year. He's only 21 years old. You have to give this guy time. You have to trust in him. You have to trust in the fact that we have a top coach in the league that's been able to develop Dwight Howard into a star, into a max player, which Andre Drummond is. You have to give him time, Brendan. Maybe Detroit won't go out and win the title next year. Maybe they will. We don't know. But Andre Drummond has the chance to develop a better back to the basket post game and go to work. He has the ability, Brendan. He has the coaching. Detroit is adding shooters. Why? Because Andre Drummond is a star, and that's who they're building around. They wouldn't be doing if Detroit wasn't building around Andre Drummond, wouldn't they be going very hard and doing everything to contain Greg Monroe?
Aaron, hold on here. You talked about Stan Van being able to develop Dwight Howard, right? Andre Drummond is not as muscular and as big as Dwight Howard. Andre Drummond is not the same player. I understand he's 21, but to me, he is more comparable, 10 times more comparable, maybe even 50 times more comparable to DeAndre Jordan and the Clippers. Is DeAndre Jordan very crucial to what the Clippers want to do? No. Is DeAndre Jordan a guy you have to pull out of the game in the 4th quarter because he cannot hit a free throw? Yes. Okay? That's why you can't name Andre your star. Now, if the Pistons build a big 3 kind of thing, then you can include Andre. But Andre cannot be number 1 because Andre cannot take over games. That is not the player he is. This is not me, knocking on Andre Drummond. This is not me saying that Andre Drummond is a bad player. This is not me saying that Andre Drummond is not very crucial to the future of the Detroit Pistons. This is me saying that Andre Drummond cannot be your star unless if you have shooters all around him, unless if you have another post presence that you can utilize late in the games that can hit free throws. But if you have that, is he then your star, or is he just maybe a good player on your team? I don't know. There's a difference. There's a difference between a star and the best player on your team. It's kind of like the Atlanta Hawks. Take your pick. Let's use Paul Millsap. Paul Millsap's not a star, but maybe he's the best player on the Hawks. Okay? Andre Drummond is not going to be the star. He's just not going to be that guy. But if he can be what DeAndre Jordan is to the Clippers, and the Pistons can build a similar way, more fitting to Stan Van's system, like the Clippers, now that's more like what Andre Drummond is. That's where he's going to benefit most, what he's going to feed off of most.
Yeah, Brandon, I think you just said every great point. I think Pistons fans around the world has bought into this. Andre Drummond's the centerpiece, the guy. But really, the reality is he's not going to win you games in the 4th quarter. He's going to lose you games, and we've seen it in his past 4 years where teams hack him. He's like the Shaquille O'Neal, and as you said, DeAndre Jordan, and Dwight Howard gets hacked at too, and he's not so great of a free throw shooter, but he can score late in games, and he can post up. And ultimately, thinking back, Greg Monroe had the ability to take over games. I remember key specific games, and I don't know if you guys have this crazy memory of random regular season games like I do, but I remember the Pistons played a game in Boston last year. Greg Monroe single-handedly took over that game. The Pistons were down double digits going into the 4th quarter, and there was a stretch of 8 or 10 straight points where Greg Monroe just posted up, turned, shot it in, took the game to overtime. I think they ultimately lost, but you saw that he can take over a game. Now, Drummond, he has some crazy nights, crazy record-breaking nights where he's going to grab in 28 rebounds, where no other center in the league besides a guy like DeAndre Jordan can do that. But really, like you said, Brennan, what is he really doing there besides just picking up garbage missed shots? I don't know, and I think this brings up the question on whether or not Brandon Jennings is the star of this team. Now, I know he wants to be. He was the star in Milwaukee, but you saw how far that got them. They were a 41-41 team at his best. It's a bit concerning, and I think we're a little too optimistic going into next season saying Andre Drummond's the guy, the star, the centerpiece, the future.
No,
I agree. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, Chris, you go
Hold
ahead.
on that Brandon Jennings. All right. So the thing about the 41-41, Brandon Jennings has never had a coach as good as Stan Van Gundy. You saw how dramatically he improved this year. So I'm not saying he's a star, but I am saying he's an all-star caliber player, a potential all-star guy. He's not the guy for us. I think ultimately, if I had to project right now on our team who is the future guy, we really don't have one. Maybe it's KCP, because I believe KCP has the physical tools, and if he can just get that shot right, he will be a totally different animal, and he can be an all-star too. So I could see us having 2 or 3 all-stars, but maybe not a star as of right now on our roster.
Brennan, go ahead.
Well, that's where the whole point of maybe the Pistons having a big 3 that kind of work together, that's maybe the way that you can classify them. Because we don't have a guy on the roster that's a star or has the potential to be a star, I think. Could KCP turn into that guy? Yes, but I really think he may be the only one. And I don't know if that can happen. That's kind of a stretch. That's where you hope that the Pistons can hit in this draft and maybe find someone. Not sure if they will. But this is all, I think, starting to make sense to everyone that Andre Drummond cannot be the star, quote unquote. He has to be a premier player. He has to be very important to our offense, important to the team, because he is, but he can't be the star. Aaron, you were going back and forth. We were raising our voice a little bit. Let's see. What do you got to say?
Well, how about Shaquille O'Neal? And I understand.
Oh, my God. Please stop. Please. Hold on. Please, Aaron. You're not going to sit here and try to compare Andre Drummond to Shaquille O'Neal.
No, okay.
Please.
Listen to me for 1 minute. Shaquille O'Neal, a center, could not hit a free throw for his life. Andre Drummond, a center, cannot hit a free throw for his life. I understand Shaq had Kobe Bryant and Dwayne Wade, which makes this a little unfathomable to talk about.
This is laughable, Aaron. Come on. You can't compare him to Shaquille O'Neal.
I'm not comparing Andre Drummond to Shaquille O'Neal, but I'm saying Andre Drummond can be a star of a team like Shaquille was and have good corner pieces around him.
Star pieces around him? Kobe Bryant, Dwayne Wade, Hall of Famers around him. Andre Drummond doesn't have a Hall of Famer around him.
To a smaller extent, these guys fit around Andre Drummond just like those guys did. And with Dwayne Wade and Shaquille O'Neal, that was basically all they really had when they were on the Heat. This team has a lot more talent than people give them credit for.
Wait. Hold on. Alonzo Mourning, Hall of Famer, was on that Heat team. Eddie Jones was on. I believe Eddie Jones was on the 06 Heat team. He was a great scorer. They had some great pieces around them. It takes pieces, and Drummond just doesn't have the ability to do what Shaq does. Shaq is planets better than Drummond because of his size. Like, no one could guard Shaq. He was insane. The only person that could guard him was Ben Wallace. I mean, Drummond is not that kind of force. He's just not that big as far as Shaq goes.
Right.
So,
Chris, can I bring up one
your
point? Here's the other thing: let's take a look at the past 4 years, defensively speaking, with Andre Drummond. It seems like whenever he plays like a center that's even considered decent, he gets his butt whooped the center drops at least 25 on him posting up. I think Drummond's a great help defender, but his man-to-man defense definitely has to improve. So there's that aspect, and we were just talking offensively speaking, and I know I've been the biggest Andre Drummond fan in the past few years, but because of some of the things he does that I think no other centers can do, and which is the ability to rebound, or offensive rebound, I should say, and be in the right spot at the right times, but that's just being a great center. And Shaquille O'Neal, if you're gonna compare the two, can you see Andre Drummond ever scoring 50 points in a game like Shaq would?
No, and I'm not trying to be like Skip Bayless and give you these unrealistic ideas, but that was more of my optimistic self talking, and I'm gonna have to say that I definitely do regret saying that after you guys have made all those points. And honestly, as soon as I said that, I kind of just realized what I just said, and I made a big mistake.
All right.
That's not I wasn't trying to say that. I can maybe explain to you guys later what I was trying to say, but if I tried to do it now, I'd probably get into a whole mess again, and it just would sound bad. What I'm trying to say is I definitely don't think we should give up on Andre Drummond being our star, because Andre Drummond was, I think, our star this year, and I think that's fair enough to say.
Right, and that got us 32 wins.
Right, but we also had a brand new coach, a midseason injury, a Josh Smith, and a new trade, which brought us in a whole new point guard where we had to refit our whole offense.
I know, Aaron,
so I think
my question here is, there's no doubt that with Stan Van Gundy and some great pieces we have around him, we don't have any like 10s if we're talking about a scale of 1 to 10, but we have a lot of 8s, as Charles Barkley would say. Yeah, with a non-competitive Eastern Conference, I think we have the recipe for a 6 seed, maybe even a 5 seed if we play our cards right. But are we really a legitimate title contender with Andre Drummond being our guy? And that's the ultimate goal, right? I mean, Stan Van Gundy doesn't have unlimited time with the Pistons. He only has 3 more years on his contract. We don't know if he's going to re-sign or what. He's an older guy. He has a family. The reason why he stopped coaching, well, besides getting fired, but he wanted to take a break and spend time with family, he might want that again. And if we want to win a championship with Stan Van Gundy, we better think fast, think quickly, and find a star.
Well, I mean, I definitely think this can be kind of like an Atlanta Hawks team where you have 4 to 5 very solid players.
I think that's the best case scenario for us right now. But they aren't. You saw what happened when they played a star in the playoffs in LeBron James. And I hate to break it to any Piston fan out there, because I'm love being as optimistic as anyone else with this. But I mean, are we ever going to be able to compete with LeBron James in the playoffs with the roster we have right now?
Nope.
And LeBron's going to be in this league for, I'd say at least 10 more years. He's going to be dominant in the next 10 years, or 8 years, I don't know. But he's going to be a star for the next 4 years, and then Stan Van Gundy's going to be gone by then maybe. So I don't want to be the negative Nancy, but I don't know. I mean, the ultimate goal is to win a title, and I don't think we have a championship-ready team, even close to a championship-ready team that is with this roster.
I agree. I said this when LeBron went to Cleveland. Cleveland's going to control the Eastern Conference. Seriously, unless any huge change happens, Cleveland's going to control this Eastern Conference for the next decade. LeBron is going to be like Tim Duncan at age 40 when he gets to age 40. He's going to be putting up crazy numbers because he's just a physical athlete. Kyrie Irving 10 years from now will be 32, so he'll still be decent. Kevin Love will be 35, but he's a shooter. So, I mean, these teams, and they got young guys like Thompson, Shumpert, Mozgov, young guys like that. So I think Cleveland's in position to control this conference for the next maybe 10 years is an exaggeration, but I'll go 6 to 8 easy.
I'm not sure if I'm going to go 8 years, and this has gone on for a long time, so I think we're going to be wrapping this up soon.
Just we're going to. Every person gets one more point they want to share. Let's start with you, Aaron.
All right. Well, I guess I'll just talk about this because that's what I was starting to get into. Is Cleveland? I can see them controlling or winning the East for the next 6 years. But Kyrie has had too many injuries to say, okay, at 32, he's still going to be an all-star. Kevin Love, as you said, he's a shooter. How long is he really going to be able to be a perennial all-star in this league? So Detroit can give a team like Cleveland scares, and I think that if a team like Detroit got matched up with the Cavs in the playoffs, I think Detroit could take them to 7 games or so, or 6, 7 games, just because Detroit seems to be able to win games that sometimes they shouldn't be competing in. But yeah, Cleveland will be winning the East for probably the next 5, 6 years, as you said.
Brendan, last final points.
Cleveland has won 2 NBA Finals games against the Golden State Warriors, the best team in the NBA this year, without Kyrie Irving, without Kevin Love. To me, right there, makes the point, Chris, you said it. Cleveland owns the East. I don't see there being a team in the Eastern Conference dethroning LeBron James for at least 8 years, could be 10, could be longer, okay? Because even when LeBron gets to be 40 and maybe decides to retire, you still got Kyrie Irving, who's not going to be in his prime, but at 32, 33 years old, you have to think he'll still be pretty good, and you have to think that Cleveland's going to keep adding talent to continue to win with LeBron and keep providing him what he needs. Unless if teams in the Eastern Conference start to balance out, there's no way that anybody's going to beat Cleveland, because everybody right now is signing for money. No one's signing to play for a championship. No one is signing in the Eastern Conference to beat LeBron. No one's going to go to New York because they want to beat Cleveland in the Eastern Conference Finals. All that's going to happen is NBA is going to continue to stay on the same realm of, I'm a free agent. Who's going to pay me the most money? Oh, I'm going to the middle of nowhere? I don't care. They're paying me. That's where I'm going. That's why I don't see LeBron James getting dethroned for 8 to 10, maybe longer years.
Chris, final points?
Okay, yeah. As far as that, I agree with you, Brendan, 100%. I can see where you're coming from, but I will agree with Aaron's point. Kyrie's durability is a huge question mark. Nothing at this point seems, shall I say, chronic, but it just seems to be happening all over. His nose, his hands, his feet, his knees, everywhere. So I can see the durability being an issue, but guys like Thompson, they have some young guys, and I think that over the next 8 to 10 years, I think that LeBron, the GM, has proved to be a great GM and make the right moves and get the right guys. So I really think that LeBron's really the only guy that can point, Brendan, attract for title chasers, really, because mostly everybody else is just mercenaries for money right now. That's just the era we live in. So I can agree with you 100% that the Cavs will dominate the East for the next 6 to 10 years.
All right. Thank you guys
Beautifully put.
Yep. Thank you guys for joining us today on Detroit Pistons Nation Radio. My final point is this. We ended on the note of kind of a sad note, saying that the Pistons are in the Eastern Conference and they're going to be competing with the greatest player in the world in LeBron James for whatever amount of years is left in that guy's career. And it doesn't look too likely that they're going to win a championship in that time. But there's some progress to be made with this team. Even a playoff appearance at this point is something to cheer about. A playoff run, it's still better than sitting on our butts in April like every other year the past 6 years. So let's take it one step at a time. Obviously, with the roster we have in place right now, there are concerns, but there's some reasons to have some optimism, and I'd say more optimism than we have in the past with the roster in the past 3, 4, 5 years. So be excited, Pistons fans. We don't know really nothing's set in stone. We got the draft coming up. We got a pretty good pick with number 8. We talked about the types of players that we could be choosing. Hopefully a potential star one day. So tune in for that. I'm Noah Loftman, your host, alongside Chris.
Hold up.
Okay.
Noah, I just gotta say one thing, guys.
Go ahead.
I love how we transitioned away from Aristotle Ilyasova, which was kind of the whole point of this talk show. But hey, I guess that's what we like to do, is talk about basketball and keep talking about it for 2 hours.
Exactly. If you want to talk, let's try and set a record one day to see how many straight hours we can go without dead air talking basketball. And I think we could honestly probably go 10, 12 hours if we have a sandwich and water next to us. But as I mentioned, I'm Noah Loftman alongside Chris Platt. Is that how I pronounce it?
Yeah, hey, I'm free tomorrow.
Hey, all right. So I'm Noah Loftman alongside Aaron Johnson, his brother Brendan Johnson, and Chris Platt. We're Detroit Pistons Nation Radio, and we're signing off.